Welcome to MMA Fancast. My name's Luke, and I have the honor of welcoming back to the show someone who is not only the number one ranked Virginia pro featherweight fighter according to Tapology, but also beginning to become a friend of the show, Jeromy the Adonis Mitchell. Jeromy, welcome back.
Thanks for having me. I'm at least getting close to the record of like most times on the show, right?
Yes, I
Heck yeah.
think so. I'm trying to. Next time you're on, I'll have the exact numbers because you also were doing the show back when it was just audio, I think too, and then we went to video. So you're on the show a bunch, and I believe the first time you were on the show, you were 1-0. I think that's right.
Yep.
So that was very
Yep.
early. Yeah, exactly. So it's been several fights now, and the last time you were on the show, you were just coming off a championship. You had gotten a championship belt, and you were getting ready to fight for the championship title in a different promotion called Showcase MMA. And obviously, I know how that went. And you got submitted by a guillotine at the very end of the second round in a fight that you were dominating. So if you're okay with it, can we start off talking about that? You're actually on the show to promote a May 22nd fight. So we will get to that. But since you've been on the show a bunch, I want to kind of give you the opportunity to kind of walk through the title fight, even though it ended in a loss for you.
Yeah, absolutely. Listen, anything you want to know about, we'll start where we start.
So going into it, we had discussed the fact, and I think you have a great attitude. You were 3-0 at the time going into the fight, and you were purposely going after people that had better records and more experience. And I believe the opponent you fought was 6-2 or 6-3 at the time going into the fight.
8-3.
8-3. Well, there you go. So triple to almost 4 times as many pro fights. And so going into the fight, what was your mindset? What was your game plan going up against him? And then how did it work?
So going into it, I had everything but my mindset was pretty bad, honestly. Like I had a lot of bad things happen in the build up to the fight. I was probably 4 or 5 weeks out, and I ended up messing up my shoulder pretty bad, and I was out for a week dealing with that. And then got back, got a sinus infection, or so I thought. Ended up having to get COVID tested because I was worried about it. So there was like 4 days of training missed while I was waiting on my test. I got the rapid test, but they wanted me to have two negative tests before I could return. So there was a lot of bumps in the road as far as that goes. But even all the way down to like right before I went into the cage, they called for my name and I hadn't even been gloved yet. Nothing on the promotion. It was just a weird miscommunication. The size of glove that I needed medium. They had small in the back. It was too small for my hand to fit. And then they had large, and they thought that the co-main had the mediums, but the co-main was a heavyweight fight, and they had extra large. So they were calling my name, and we still hadn't found like the right size gloves. And so it was like chaotic even to that moment. I got into my corner, and I was trying to take my last drink, and I actually spilled the water in the cage. Like it was just weird little like nuances, like stupid things that were happening. But going into the fight, like the game plan was, I knew it was durable. I knew he'd been around for a while. I knew he had experience. So going into it, kind of the game plan was to, use the first round to fill him out. Really try not to show anything from my deck of cards in the first round. And then round 2 kind of open up more, and then hopefully get the finish in round 3. I got out there, and it just felt too good. Like, you know what I mean? Like everything was just going great. Even in my warm-up, even though I said all these little speed bumps were in the way, even in my warm-up, things felt great. So I went in there, and I'd watched him fight his second pro fight when I hadn't even made my amateur debut. So for me, being in there, and once I drew first blood, I guess it's kind of literally, but I don't mean it that way. It was kind of like one of those things where I was like, holy crap, I'm really doing it. Like it was something that I said it, but I don't know if I really believed that I could do it. And then it was like I was there, I was doing it, and I kind of got, I don't want to say starstruck, but I guess I did. And it caused me to burn too much energy in round 1 because I was like, oh my God, I'm really about to do it. So now I've got to do it now, like before it escapes or something. And so I just burnt myself out. And then in round two, I had very little left. I had anticipated circling and getting, back on my bike, get my breath back in me, and some of the lactic out of my muscles. I was circling, but he did a very good job at staying in my face. So I wasn't getting very much recovery. I wanted to shoot in and just try to like kind of rest on top of him for the duration of round two. I was prepared to lose the round. Not that I wanted to, but I was prepared in with the trade-off of me being able to recover a little bit. I knew I wasn't going to have very much volume, but I figured I would either edge the round out or very barely lose it. And I knew I won the first round 10-8. So that was kind of the plan. And when I shot in, I shot a bad shot. I'm not here to lie and say that I shot a good shot. I mean, I shot a poor shot. I was fatigued, and I shot a very lazy shot, and I got caught by a very good grappler in a day one submission. I know 10,000 ways out of, but when you're tired, you're gassed, and it gets locked in, there's very little you can do. And I had to eat humble pie that night. But if it's up to me, I'll rewrite that loss after this win. So,
well, thank you so much, Jeromy. You've always been so gracious to share how you're feeling and what's going on with you. So I appreciate you kind of walking us through that whole thing. And even though guillotines for any type of wrestler transitioning to MMA is, like you said, the day one submission, they're effective. I mean, guillotines are effective because they work. I mean, yes, there are ways out of them and there's ways to prevent them, but the reality is, even at the highest of high levels, and this was fighting for a pro belt, they work and they're effective. And obviously, when it comes to getting caught in a choke versus getting an orbital bone broken, or like the cyborg Santos when he got that knee from Venom Page, there's many worse ways to lose. And I do know, we'll get back to the fight here in a second, but I do know that you had losses in your amateur career, and obviously your pro career had been blemishless, and you were really focusing on perfecting yourself. Now that you've had basically just a month, we're a little under a month from the fight you just had in March 27th, and we're late April, so we're almost a month. You said you had to eat humble pie. What is it like now that one is on your record, and you're no longer undefeated? What's it like now going forward, clearing your head and kind of refocusing?
It feels like I left a maintenance mindset and adapted a growth mindset. I found myself doing things, and not throughout the camp I didn't realize, but afterwards, because anybody that knows me knows that I'm like overly meticulous when it comes to preparation. I almost never consider the event besides in my interviews, and then once I'm there, the whole camp has nothing to do with the opponent most of the time. It's just kind of like, this is what they do, what do I do about it? And so it's like, how can I how can I create the perfect day to get better for the next 6 weeks? So that began with assuming or assessing what I did wrong. And when I say what I did wrong, obviously it's the things in the fight. That's only, 7 seconds that I messed up. Other than that, it was great. So if I couldn't really get much from that 7-8 seconds that I had, where I made this mistake. So I had to go back and dig through my training. What was I doing wrong that led to this moment? Simple things as far as overtraining to the point that I couldn't push myself as hard in training like I would in a fight, because I was, I never came in at 100%. So I never could give it 100%. The effort was at 100, but my body was at 40 at all times. Like I said, I had injuries and sicknesses that I wouldn't have had otherwise. If I had not beaten my body down so much. And I'm very, like I said, overly meticulous. So it's like, if it's on paper and it says I'm going to do it, I do it. I don't care what my body says. And so I realized that I have to kind of treat myself like a human instead of livestock. And so there was like things that I did that, I was like, well, I've won, and I've done this every time. So therefore it's like, I've got to do it. But I couldn't tell you why I'm doing it. I'm just doing it because it's led me to victory before. And there's a lot of things you've got to do that. And, you got to do what got you to the dance. but at what cost? And so what I realized is I was like, I'm doing something that I'm already good at, or I'm doing something the same way. I'm not actually growing at it. I'm just maintaining what I already have. And I was getting better, don't get me wrong, but I was getting better at a way slower rate than I feel like I could have. So now I feel like I'm back in a growth mindset where I'm trying new things. I'm more open-minded. And I know quite often a lot of people don't get confidence, especially from a loss.
Right.
But like I said, I got out there and I realized that I was capable of it, even though I had never believed it before I said it. And I
Sure.
tried to believe it, but my subconscious wasn't fooled. And I spent most of my life being a very like unconfident human. I've never really radiated confidence until 2 or 3 fights ago.
Right.
But I think it was a fake confidence. I tricked my conscious, but not my subconscious. And so now I feel like I've developed a growth mindset, which will help my skills, but I've also developed a lot of confidence behind it. And just like GSP says, having skills without confidence is kind of like having money in the bank, but no way to access it. And I finally got my card to access it. So that would be what I would say has changed since that fight moving forward.
Well, that's a huge change, and it's a very healthy, like you said, a growth mindset, a healthy mindset that you can actually get more out of even a loss because it allowed you to access. I love GSP. I was just watching some of his. He had just put out a video on GQ. It's about how he spent his first million, and most of it was buying his parents' cars and
Oh,
paying off his sister's education debt and stuff. I guess GQ's doing these like interview famous rich people on how they spent their first million. But it was kind of cool to see how GSP's mind works. But
yeah.
yeah, that's a great quote, and it also connects to the fact that you need the skills too. I think one of the things that happens a lot in MMA, and you've been around MMA enough, particularly in the amateur world, is you have fighters that have all the confidence, but they're not willing to get the skills. And there
Yeah.
has to be that balance. Obviously, you're in a situation where you had more skills than the confidence. And so you have to be able to access that, like GSP was pointing out. But I would encourage any person who's interested in MMA or even beginning in MMA to really try to learn. I've had plenty of amateur MMA fighters who are just amateurs already trying to think that, if they won by knockout, they'll always win by knockout, things like that, not developing their skills. But getting back to you, I do think it's great that you got to fight somebody who you've kind of looked up to in the fight world and seen when you're much younger, because in your career going forward, if you rebound and continue to do well, like you're going to do, that's going to happen again at another level where you're gonna recognize a fighter that now you're fighting, and you're going to have known his career earlier. So I think it's a good experience for you to have. Now, explain the quick turnaround. You lost. I think you said something on Facebook. Always keeping options open. That you were okay. And then now you're fighting May 22nd for the same promotion. And so talk about the quick turnaround, and how did you feel taking that fight coming up now in exactly a month?
So for me, it was like right after, a lot of times fighters don't necessarily do an interview right after they lost us, like in the cage. And especially after a finish. So for me, it was like, you can't just speak when you win. You don't, you owe it to people because there's somebody out there that watched the way that I lost, and it'll show them that, like, just because you lose, you don't fail. So I feel like I got out there, I said what I said, but my actions had to match that, because words are one thing, actions are another. And so, if I'm going to say that I'm fine, I'm healthy, I'm ready to get back at it, and all these things, but I don't do it, then I didn't mean it. You know what I mean? So for me, it's like one of my least favorite things, my least thing that'll make me turn away from somebody, as far as a personality trait, is somebody that says they want one thing, but their actions don't show the same thing. So if you say, I want to lose 10 pounds, but I see you at the drive through McDonald's every day, your actions don't match your words, so I can't really believe anything you say. And I feel like, to me, one of the most important things is to be a man of my word. you're only as good as your word. So therefore, if I tell you something, that's what I mean. And you can ask anyone around me. I'm very honest, and a lot of people say, "Oh, I'm bluntly honest," and that's their way of being like, I'm really rude. I'm not rude, but I am honest. And so when I say something, I mean it. Therefore, when I say that I'm healthy, I'm ready for a quick turnaround, I've got to have the actions to back it up. Was I excited to get right back into fighting? I wanted to take a little break. I had completely anticipated, winning the belt and taking a break and waiting on a bigger show. When I say a break, I don't mean out of training, because it's became a habit at this point. I go crazy without it. But I wanted to take kind of like a little competition break, because I've either been in a fight camp to actually fight somebody, or been in a fight camp for an event that either gets canceled or opponent withdrawals or something. So, I've been pretty constantly at it, but I felt like that wasn't the note that I wanted to take a break after. And even after this one, I no longer want to break. I don't want to break until I can rewrite that one. And I know I can't take the one off my record, but I can put that same one and put a green, color green beside it too.
Yeah.
So, I will finish my career undefeated, in the sense of I will never have a loss go unavenged, at least due to my efforts. If I never get that fight back, I'm not bitter. I like Steven personally. He's a great guy. I talked to him after the fight. I like him. I look forward to training with him one day, but I just don't feel like I can do it until I at least try my best to get that one back. And so the quick turnaround will hopefully show that that was a slip up on my end, and I'm ready to put on a good performance. It hasn't affected anything. The dream's still the same. The path's still the same. Still just as good. A lot of people, you lose once, they want to write you off. I want to show that you can't do that to me, and then hopefully get a quick turnaround and get the title fight back. The reason in wanting to go and fight in the same promotion for me is, one, it's very close to home. It's a 2-hour drive for me.
Okay.
And another thing with that is that, that's where he holds the belt at, and I want that fight back. Therefore, I have to show a reason to give me that fight again. And that's what May the 22nd is for me. It's nothing personal against the guy I'm fighting. It's and I'm not looking past him. And I don't mean to sound corny when I say I'm looking through him. I'm he's not the main focus. Obviously, he's my main focus in training, but mentally my focus is getting back what I feel like was taken from me. So I've got a chip on my shoulder, and there's nothing more dangerous than a person that has something to prove. And I feel like for the first time in a while, I have something to prove.
Absolutely, and that's what can come out of a challenge or an adversity and adverse result. I mean, when it comes to MMA, and I've tried to explain this to people outside of the MMA world, because I've had some people ask me why MMA, even the great GSP, why the records of MMA fighters are overall fights are relatively a few number. I mean, Habib Nurmagomedov has just retired at 29-0, and a 30 fight career is considered a really long career. I mean, I think Diamond Poirier is up in the 40s, but the reality is 20 fights can be a full career. And I always explain it like this, because boxing, that people get tons of fights sometimes.
Yeah.
But I always explain that in boxing, there's only 2 ways to win and only 2 ways to lose. That's it. There's only 2 ways to win, 2 ways to lose. And in MMA, there are 25 ways to win, 30 ways, 40, 50. I mean, but because of that, there's also that number of ways to lose. And so I think for every win you get in MMA, even great wins, there's always something that could have gone wrong. In your case, you had a little bit of a desperate shot or a tired shot. And that's what happens when you take a tired shot. When it comes down to it, before the fight, we had talked a little bit about you going back up in weight, and you were talking about getting a nutritionalist. And how's that going on the nutrition side, both the fight that you did have and now? And are you continuing that nutritionalist plan given what you were talking about before about the weight?
So everything literally went, as far as that goes, absolutely perfect. Possibly the added mass and just getting used to moving it caused it a little extra fatigue. But everything went great. I feel great still. Definitely plan on using the same plan moving forward, because it was the same plan that won me my championship at bantamweight as well. And it was the best I ever felt, even in the, I don't even know, like 30 fights that I had before I turned pro. So definitely would want to repeat it. The only concern that I would have, or that is not even a real concern, but the only thing that was strange about my last fight was normally I'll put on a lot more weight, and that even for my bantamweight fight, I put on a lot of weight. So I don't really know what was going on. I got like a little sinus infection, chest congestion, whatever, the week of the fight. And I hate to be the guy that ever says that played anything into the cardio side, so I'm not going to. But what I am going to say is that I know I was sweating through my bed sheets every night, the whole week leading up to the fight, including the night before the fight. So when I actually went back into the cage that night, I went in there at 148 pounds so I had put on 3 pounds from the time that I had, rehydrated. Now I went to bed the night after weigh-ins at like 152, 153, right on track to normally wake up around 58, 59, like I went into fight week at. But I sweat through my sheets and I lost the weight that night. And I'm still unsure why. I don't know if it had anything to do with like the sinus infection or whatever I was dealing with, or if it had anything I have no idea. But I know as far as the nutrition side goes, that's the best I've ever felt, and the best I've ever rehydrated when I was at bantamweight. And even though I was compromised, she made me feel good enough like I wasn't. My nutritionist gave me everything my body needed.
Yeah.
So I definitely plan on using the same protocol moving forward.
Well, what a detailed and thorough answer. It's one of the reasons why I like having you on is it's great to know. I always think MMA Fancast, I want people that are maybe not quite like watching every aspect of MMA, that are still kind of learning about it. And you giving these answers are really helpful. It's a big journey as a regional pro that you are to kind of put together your training camp, whether it be training partners, coaches, in this case, nutritionalists. And that's a part that we don't see as much when you see it at the UFC level. Some people still change camps and do things, but a lot of those things have been ironed out. So I do think it's an exciting journey for you, obviously. And I think it's wonderful that you have a fight coming up. So for you, what is your prediction going into this fight on May 22nd? Because you do have an opponent ahead of you. I know your future goals, which you have a passion now to get that revenge. And you had mentioned GSP. I consider GSP, I'm a fanboy of GSP.
Yeah.
I consider GSP to have one of it's hard now with Khabib and John Jones. They have slightly better records because one never lost. John Jones really never lost, other than his drug use and some other issues. So sort of, but GSP lost twice, but only to current champs in an attempt to get their championship fights, and then one as a contender, one as a champion, and then got them both back for a title fight, as opposed to waiting till they were like 55 and fighting them later, a la Tito Ortiz and Chuck Liddell, right? So it's really great that you have that mindset of like, hey, if you can't win them all, you want to make sure that you're getting them back. But going into this fight, May 22nd, what's your prediction? What's your mindset going into this one?
So mindset's still the same. Every fight is the most important fight. Sure. Therefore, and to even get the vision that I want, I have to go through this, man. So that's the plan. My heart of hearts tells me I'm going to have a first round finish. But I'm also focusing a lot on being patient. So therefore, and not, using it all in round one. Sure. So that might allow him to make it to the second round. But if I get out there and I feel it, because that's, you've got to. And I just don't see him making it to round two. I think I'm going to have a first round TKO or submission. But, my patience may allow him to make it to round two, to where the TKO or submission will come. The submission, though, if it is a submission, will come through due to him trying to avoid the TKO and giving up the submission. That's my prediction.
Well, just because you mentioned something, I'm going to bring up a Donald Cowboy Cerrone quote here for a second, but I'm on fire with my fanboyness of some of these guys. I stalk them and watch all their stuff, but that's a great, I mean, that's a great mindset and prediction to have, is that you need it to happen in the cage, right? You've got to
Mhm.
have that opportunistic is a fun word to say. I love saying it when I'm doing commentary because I think it's a very real thing in
Mhm.
MMA that you have to put yourself in the position to then be opportunistic, whether it be a knockout or like you're saying, you might get a submission if he's trying to avoid something else. But a
Mhm.
Donald Cowboy Cerrone quote is that the best takedown is a knockdown. That's Donald Cowboy Cerrone's quote because he loves Muay Thai, but he's
Mhm.
also ended up. I mean, he's in a bit of a slump now later in his
Mhm.
career, but there was a time where he was actually having a higher rate of submission wins than knockout wins. But I believe it was he knocked down Edson Barbosa with a stiff jab and then submitted him with a choke. But it was one of those, and it was after that fight, I believe he said that his favorite takedown is a knockdown. So just figured I'd throw that one out there because I like that.
I'm probably going to go 3 interviews till you forget that and then recycle it.
Oh, and then I'll be like Jeromy Mitchell, the Adonis, as the Adonis has always said, the best thing is a knockdown. Yeah, absolutely. If you plan that out well enough to do that, I will tip my hat to you in the future. So obviously, best wishes to you and your family. I know your wife just had a birthday, and it's very exciting to see you growing growing your relationship with her and your family because you're not just a fighter, you're a person first. So really appreciate continuing this relationship and friendship, and hopefully in the future you'll be able to make another stop back to Pittsburgh to 247 Fighting Championships. I think it'd be
Mhm.
great to finally get to see you on a card as
Uh,
what should have happened a year ago because of COVID. So it's been thrilling. Best wishes to you. Can't wait to have you back on after May 22nd there for Showcase MMA. Thanks so much, Jerry, for coming on.
Thank you for having me.
Have a good one.
You too.